16 of the Subcommittee on International Human Rights. Today, we meet to hear from witnesses in view of a study of the role of the Canadian Ombudsperson for Responsible Enterprise to ensure an orderly meeting. I'd encourage all participants to mute their microphones when they're not speaking and address all comments through the chair. When you have 30 seconds left in your questioning time, I will signal you with this paper. Where do I have that paper? Hang on one second, everybody. This paper here at 30 seconds. Yep. And interpretations available through the globe icon on the bottom of your screen, English or French. So for those that are using the platform for the first time, and please note that screen captures or photos are not permitted. I now would like to welcome our witnesses for the first panel. From the platform of Amazonian Indigenous Peoples United in Defense of Their Territory, we have Ms. Aymara Leon Cepeda, sociologist and human rights coordinator in Peru, subgroup of oil spills. And on behalf of the United Steelworkers, we've got National Director Ken Newman, who I've known for many years, and welcome Ken, and Department Lead Doug Olithius. And if I mispronounced that, I apologize. And now we are going to have an opportunity to invite our guests, our witnesses, to make their opening statement for 5 minutes. We'll begin with Ms. Cepeda, and then we will have I believe it's Mr. Newman that will be speaking for 5 minutes. Thank you. You may begin.
Thank you so much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Aymara Leon. I'm part of the technical team of 4 indigenous organizations from the Peruvian Amazon area. And as such, I'm also part of the subgroup of human rights national coordinator regarding oil spills. And today I will address the case of Frontera Energy, a Canadian oil company that has impacted the territory of several indigenous communities. With that purpose, I will use some of the information that has been collected as part of an investigation supported by Oxfam. And lastly, I want to say that Aurelio Chino, one of the indigenous leaders that I work with, was supposed to be here, but he's attending a very important meeting, so I apologize for his absence. So just to begin with some context, Frontera Energy is a Canadian company, oil company, that has operated a Peruvian lot since September 2015 until February 2020. This oil lot is located in the northern Peruvian Amazon area in the border with Ecuador, and the lot overlaps with the territory of 25 indigenous communities that belong to the Achuar, Quechua, and Quichua nations. Now, what I want to focus about today is regarding the environmental degradation that has been caused by Frontera Energy's operations. In these 5 years, Frontera Energy has shown a general non-compliance with the environmental regulation and sectoral regulation. They have constantly refused to give proper maintenance to the infrastructure of the lot, and they have also shown a lack of proper and fast response to the environmental emergencies that have occurred in these past 5 years. As a result, we have more than 90 spills in oil lot 192. This is an unbelievable record in our oil industry. And most of these spills have been caused due to corrosion, that is lack of maintenance, and also due to operational failures that could have been easily avoidable if Frontera had complied with the environmental regulations. Now, this increase in oil spills has been, like I was saying, outrageous, and it has doubled the average of spills that were recorded in this same lot with the previous oil operator. This increase of spills, if we only look at the corrosion spills, we can see that they have increased in 650% during the time that Frontera Energy has operated the lot. And it is important for us to mention that these spills do not occur in empty spaces in the Amazon region, but they occur in the territory of these communities that are being impacted by them. In some cases, some communities have been impacted by almost 20 spills in the past 5 years, meaning that they have been highly exposed to pollutants such as hydrocarbons and heavy metals. And it is also important for you to know that these indigenous communities, their livelihoods depend heavily on the rivers, the streams, the lagoons, and the forests, because they are dedicated to the fishing and hunting activities. They depend on these lagoons for water for bathing, cooking, and drinking. So their rights to health, to access water, their right to food, and access their livelihoods have been deeply affected by Frontera Energy's operations. Now, the current situation of the lot is that Frontera has left without presenting and implementing an abandonment plan that aims to remediate all the environmental impacts that have been caused during the operations of Frontera Energy. They have also left with several social commitments pending with the communities. Now, the indigenous organizations have taken several actions to try to stop these human rights violations, but they have not been able to do so. And that is why what indigenous organizations want is for the Canadian government to provide mechanisms to support their search for truth, justice, and reparations for those affected by the Canadian companies. Indigenous organizations require neutral and independent entities that can surveil and investigate the human rights violations that have occurred in their territory. And they want their voices to be heard directly, and their testimonies and the evidence that they have of these impacts to be taken into account when conducting investigations. Indigenous organizations currently do not feel that the Corps provides a fair and sufficient mechanisms for them to report the violations that have occurred. We believe that the Corps should be strengthened and should incorporate intercultural principles for it to be a safe space and a useful space for those who have been affected by Canadian companies. Furthermore, we believe that the Canadian government should also develop other mechanisms or instances that do not only investigate or sanction Canadian companies that violate human rights, but also to contribute to the reparation of such violations. And finally, we believe that there should be a full compliance of the Maastricht principles regarding extraterritorial obligations for Indigenous peoples to feel supported by the Canadian government in their search for reparations and justice. This would be my initial presentation. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Ms. Cepeda. And now we'll hear from, I believe, is it Mr. Newman that will be speaking?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you very much, Peter.
And good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you, and thanks for having me. My name is Ken Newman. I'm the Canadian National Director for the United Steelworkers, and I'm accompanied today by Doug Olthius, who's the Department Leader for Global Affairs from my office. I would like to bring this committee back to January the 17th of 2018. I happened to be in Ottawa that day standing beside the Minister of International Trade. At that time, it was François-Philippe Champagne, as he announced the creation of the Canadian Ombudsperson Responsible Enterprise, the Corps. I was happy to be there. Those kind of press conferences are sometimes a bit of a celebration of a milestone or an achievement, and that's what this was. That 2018 announcement signaled a real change, a change from a failed policy of the Harper Conservatives, a change that would benefit communities and workers around the world that are impacted by Canadian mining companies. Also a change that would benefit the mining industry by ensuring a credible way to investigate allegations of abuse and to call out those individual companies harming people. This formed the basis for a better global reputation for Canadian mining. Minister Champagne and his government were very clear. The Corps would have the ability to independently investigate complaints, including the ability to compel witnesses and documents. But as we all know, this is not the case. Knowing what I know now, I would have not joined Minister Champagne on the podium in January of 2018. Without the powers to compel witnesses and documents, there is no breakthrough. There is no good first step. Instead, we are stuck with what the Harper government put in place, just under a new name. It is true that there is more funding, but however, an ineffective office, even with more money, is still an ineffective office. If the Liberal government had followed through on its commitments, we would not have been stuck in the middle of a pandemic going over old ground, and again making the case for the creation of an effective office. A few weeks ago, the Steelworkers Humanity Fund released a report, not even bare minimum, that linked poverty wages to the supply chains of Canadian brands and retailers in Bangladesh. That report amplified the voices of women and men in Bangladesh, where the women sew our clothes earn between $6 or $7 per day. That's per day, not per hour. To earn living wages, garment workers' wages would have to be tripled. The right to a decent life, to a living wage, that is a basic human right. The UN guiding principles on business and human rights are clear. Companies must respect human rights throughout their supply chain. Companies have responsibilities that extend to workers employed by the supplier factories. The core mandate includes the garment sector. An ombudsperson's office with effective powers could have a role to investigate allegations of human rights harms caused in garment supply chains and pointing a way to change, but not the core as it stands. We have no confidence that a complaint brought by Bangladesh workers would result in any meaningful investigation. An investigation that depends completely on the cooperation of the company being investigated is hamstrung from the start. Keep in mind that many Canadian retailers appear intent on refusing to take the simple steps of publicly disclosing their list of supplier factories. They prefer to continue to operate in the dark. Privately owned Canadian retailers who do not publicly release financial data have no inclination or incentive for transparency. The core as it stands can't begin to untangle the complexities of the global garment system. As Canada's main mining union, the steelworkers are convinced that mining can make an enormous contribution towards the equitable social and economic development of communities in Canada and globally, while minimizing the impact on the environment and meeting our climate goals. But for the potential to be realized, the mining industry must respect human rights. That is not often the case, given Canadian mining a bad name in many parts of the world. A strong and effective core could also give Canadian mining a leg up on global competition. Communities impacted by mining are likely going to be more receptive to Canadian investment if they have a credible avenue in Canada in cases where they feel their rights are violated. Financial markets and purchasers like Microsoft are also becoming sensitive to issues of climate and human rights along supply chains. They will increasingly favor companies whose social license to operate appear solid and who are not tainted by lingering allegations of corporate malfeasance. For all of these considerations, the Canadian mining would benefit from a credible core. I can't say it more clearly than this. A strong core is good for the Canadian mining industry. Rather than resist and lobby against the office and powers that are needed.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. If you could just bring it to a conclusion.
My last point, the Canadian industry do well to embrace it as the cornerstone of a global pitch. My final sentence, the Canadian industry would be fully committed to human rights, and Canadian governments have a place as an effective office that would hold their feet to the fire. So the committee.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you,
Mr. Newman. And now we're going to proceed to questions from members. We have the first questioner is going to be a Liberal member, and that is MP Maninder Sidhu. And welcome to our committee. He's new to our committee. He's also the PS, and congratulations on your new role to International Development, MP Sidhu. And now you will have 7 minutes of question time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm happy to be part of this amazing committee amongst this amazing group of people here. I want to thank Ms. Cepeda, Mr. Newman, and Mr. Otius for being here with us today and providing your valuable insights. Mr. Newman, you finished off touching on industry and how they can partner in our goal of ensuring that Canadian companies operating abroad are holding themselves to a high standard. Mr. Newman, what do you think industry can do to ensure that human rights violations in countries where Canadian companies are operating can be avoided?
Sorry, I missed the last part. What can Canadian companies do?
What can Canadian companies do to ensure that human rights violations don't happen in the countries that they function in?
Well, I think that they should rely on the government to basically, if you bring in strong core standards, as initially was contemplated in 2018 when Minister Champagne basically made that announcement. I think that is the deterrent that companies will live up to their standards. I mean, more recently, you've heard the news. There's several companies, without naming them, there's a whole bunch of allegations being made where they're outside of Canada. That just gives a bad reputation to us as Canadians. Look we represent a good portion of the mining industry. I'm proud of our mining industry because we probably have somewhat of an advantage. We have a much better social society. We have stronger trade unions that basically have a working dialogue with companies to make sure that they live up to the environmental standards and treat employees with dignity and safety and health and all those things. The fact of the matter is there's a lot of evidence, and there's been a lot of cases around the globe where that's not been the case. And this is an opportunity, as Minister Champagne had laid out in 2018, that we can bring that change forward to make sure that all these companies live up to a standard and that they're held accountable. If they're just allowed to do as they see fit, we're just going to continue to hear what the sister said earlier in regards to what's happened with the oil spills and so on. Is there has to be accountability, and the government has to have the ability to basically subpoena and do the things that we've asked for in the initial core.
Thank you for that, Mr. Newman. And definitely, there's a great number of companies that are responsible as well in the mining sector. I came from the Natural Resource Committee, so I've spoken to many of them during testimony. So thank you for mentioning that, Mr. Newman. The government of Canada and industry are partners in ensuring Brand Canada, which you just spoke of, and we want to make sure it remains strong worldwide. How can the core further support these sectors in ensuring that human rights are upheld and the environment is protected? So again, touching on the first question, but more so on the environment angle now.
Maybe I'll just turn that over to Doug, who's been working with some of that. So Doug, maybe you want to take that one.
Thank you so much. The question from Mr. Sidhu is interesting. The Canadian government certainly can partner with private business in many ways to support those businesses, but the role of the core is not necessarily that. The role of the core should be to investigate complaints. Now that will be good for Canadian business because there'll be a credible way to clear the allegations. Either they'll be shown to be not credible, or they'll be shown to be credible, and then there'll be a path to remedy. But the core's job, in my view, isn't to make the world a better place for Canadian business. The core's job is to make sure Canadian companies take their responsibilities to human rights seriously. And so I appreciate the fact that we want to support Canadian businesses, which we absolutely do. But the best way to do that, I think, for this government is to have a credible way to investigate complaints, to clear the air. And I hope that comes close to answering your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Otius. And I'm going to move on to Ms. Cepeda. Ms. Cepeda, thank you for being with us here today. I'm not sure what time zone you're in or what hour of the day it is where you are, but thank you for being here and providing your valuable insights. Ms. Cepeda, how have state officials in your country been involved in facilitating the operations of Canadian companies? I'm very interested to know that.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
So my question was, how have state officials in your country been involved in facilitating the operations of Canadian companies?
Well, yeah, I would say that state officials try to give a partial facilitation for any kind of international or national company that are interested in the oil lots. We do have regulations that give better points or to facilitate the acquisition of oil lots for companies that have shown better environmental practices previously, but it's not, it's not directly to Canadian companies. So I wouldn't say that there are specific mechanisms for that.
Okay, so even in the domestic mechanism, you don't see any there. Okay, and could you describe the policies and legislation surrounding corporate responsibility within your jurisdiction of what you've seen?
Yes, unfortunately, the regulations are not as strong or as effective as we would like it to be. The operator of the lot, of the same lot, the previous operator, which is Pluspetrol, it's a Dutch company, also left the lot in 2015 without presenting an abandonment plan. So what we're seeing is that companies are repeating the same kind of practices as in the past. And unfortunately, our regulation or the enforcement of the regulation is not being enough to protect the rights of indigenous populations or the environmental right in general. So there has been some progress, especially promoted by indigenous organizations. And for example, in consultation processes, we try to make the regulations better. But as I was saying, I don't think that the enforcement capacity of our state officials is enough to stop these kind of human violations. That's why lately indigenous organizations try to seek these international spaces for investigations or for justice, as sometimes the only means that they have to have this justice and reparations. That's why we think it's so important to strengthen these kind of spaces.
Thank you, Ms. Cepeda. And we're moving now to MP Chu for 7 minutes.
Thank you, witness, for coming and testifying to us. I have a question for Ms. Cepeda to start with. I've learned that your organization and the United Nations Development Program have released a joint report under PVTI that has registered more than 1,200 reports of extractive industry impacts. First of all, could you provide the report and submit that for SDIR for distribution in English and French, please? And of the 1,200, 1,200 impacts, I was wondering how many of these are originated from Canadian companies.
Right. Yes, I will send that report for you to be able to access it. And regarding your question about how many of these impacts have been caused by Canadian companies. So because Frontera Energy hasn't presented their abandonment plan, we don't have all the official data that would allow us to know all the impacts that they've had. The only official data that we have regarding Frontera Energy, which is the only Canadian company in the oil industry in the Amazon area, is the number that I mentioned earlier, that is that they've had around 90 spills during the 5 years that they operated lot 192. But Frontera also operates another lot that is outside the Amazon area. The data from that case, I would not be able to provide it right now.
So Frontera, it's the only Canadian company or the only company operating in the oil industry?
The only Canadian company operating in the oil industry, yeah.
Okay, so are there other foreign companies operating in that space?
Yes, other lots are operated by Dutch companies, Argentinian companies, and yeah.
And so your organization also monitored those, and we have not heard similar offense from you or recorded by you.
The organizations that I work with do the surveillance basically in 2 oil lots, which is the 192 and lot 8, which is operated by Pluspetrol. So the number that you mentioned earlier, the 1,209 impacted sites that the indigenous monitors have helped discovering are in both of these lots. but mainly in 192 because it's the law that this program of monitoring has worked the longest.
Okay, so other than environmental impact, which from what you have tabled to the committee, it seems already pretty severe and bad impact to the indigenous community there. But from other than the environmental nature, has there been any other human rights related report against the Canadian company?
Yes. So what we also talk about in this investigation that we did with the support of Oxfam is how the social conflicts have increased in this oil lot because of Frontera's way to manage these social conflicts and their conflicting practices with the indigenous organizations. We have reported to our own ombudsman person here in Peru that during the COVID pandemic, Frontera left the indigenous communities without the payments for the work that they have done for Frontera Energy, and they stopped providing also the social programs that should have continued during the pandemic. Another thing that the indigenous organizations have reported during the COVID-19 pandemic is that the indigenous organizations requested Frontera for them to allow the oxygen plant that is located in the lot to function as a medical oxygen plant in the context of COVID. And Frontera Energy, what their response was is, I will only turn on this oxygen plant if you allow me to restart the whole operations in the lot, which is conditioning the access to health for the operation of the lot.
Thank you. Has there been, has the presence of these foreign corporations led to any improvement of the local communities in terms of their life? Because you mentioned about the Frontera has not lived up to the obligations that they have promised, but has there been positive changes that they were able to bring to the community?
What is normally argued is that because of oil operations, the state gets some revenues that could be invested in projects such as building schools or other type of projects that could be implemented in the communities. Unfortunately, the amount that is destined for the community's development is not enough for them to, I don't know, build a hospital or build or contribute to projects that could significantly change their opportunities and their conditions. So yes, there are social funds that go to them, but it's not enough for the impacts.
Thank you. In the remaining 30 seconds that I have, let me ask you: is the amended improve core mandate the only way to receive the kind of justice that you hope for? Is there a litigation approach that could actually be taken?
I think we're going to have to hold on to that question for another round. But
thank you, Chair.
Thank you. You're welcome. We are moving to the block, and Monsieur Alexis Brunel Duceppe for 7 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being with us tonight. We've been studying the ombudsperson for 2 months, and I think that this evening we'll be able to answer certain questions that have been left unanswered since the beginning of this study. Madam Cepeda, I listened to your speech, and it's the kind of testimony that Canadians and Quebecers should hear more often. And unfortunately, they're not aware of what's happening abroad. And thank you so much for being here. It's very important, and it will be in the record, as we say, on the record, as we say. When you talked about Frontera Energy, did Canadian authorities try to assist you in collecting information with regards to their responsibility? Are you aware of this?
Thank you for the question. No, Indigenous organizations have not received any kind of aid or help from the Canadian government to the date in their search for justice or in the case of the Lot 192. What Indigenous organizations have done is to address Frontera Corporation, not Frontera Energy in Peru, but Frontera Energy Corporation recently with a letter for Frontera as a corporation to respond for the damages that their branch in Peru has caused.
Merci. Et là, je vais vous poser une question.
Thank you. And now I have another question really to your knowledge. Do you believe that if the ombudsperson, the Canadian ombudsperson, had more power that we've been seeking for a while, do you believe that Frontera would be acting the same way as they are now?
No, definitely. We believe that the pressure and the public image of oil companies is very important for them. And so when we have pronouncements or statements from public entities or from government entities, we do believe that change can be made. If we had a proper investigation and a proper public report that would have the evidence of what Frontera is doing with these indigenous communities, we believe that their public image would be affected and that they could have more pressure into complying with the Peruvian environmental norms that would then impact in the indigenous people's rights.
Merci. Une dernière question pour vous après ça.
Thank you. And one final question for you before I move on to the other witnesses. It's so important that you answer this question because you have such an expertise in this field. There are a lot of Canadians and Quebecers who believe that we are leaders in human rights matters. And I'm not saying that we're the worst out there, but I don't think that we're as good as we think. Sorry, my dog is barking in the background. I apologize. And I lost my concentration a little bit. But what I was saying is that we're not as good as we think we are. And I think that it's important because our committee will be publishing a report and we will take into consideration what you've said today. And in your experience in Peru and with regards to indigenous populations in the Amazon region, do Canadian companies, or rather, how do these Canadian companies compare with other foreign companies? Are we better? Are we worse? Are we kind of midway between both? What do you believe about this?
What I can say is regarding the case of these organizations, and unfortunately, and I'm sorry to say it this way, but I'll put it with numbers. In 15 years, Pluspetrol Corporation had 116 spills in this same lot. That is in 15 years, and Pluspetrol is not a responsible company, and we have also denounced their practices. But in 5 years, Frontera had 90 spills. That is almost the same amount as Pluspetrol in 15 years. And they are doing the same as their previous operator. They're leaving the country without taking any responsibility for what they have done in these communities. So I'm afraid I cannot say that this Canadian company has done any better than the other operators that we have seen in this territory. And that is why we believe in the importance of these kind of spaces and trying to improve the mechanisms that indigenous organizations can access for their rights to be respected.
Merci infiniment. Merci infiniment, Madame Cepeda.
Thank you so much, Madame Cepeda. Do I still have any time left, Mr. Chair? I think I should have at least 5 minutes.
Seconds.
Okay, je vais y aller.
All right, so I'll go quickly. I apologize, Mr. Newman. When we heard from the ombudsperson, she told us that she was fine with her resources, but she wasn't able to specify her budget. And in the last budget, we saw that the budget would be increased by $16 million over 5 years and $3.3 million subsequently. I would like you to elaborate. Is it a matter of resources, a matter of money, or a question of power, Mr. Newman?
Well, I think, as I said in my testimony, thank you for that question, is that it's not a matter, it's a matter of money, it's a matter of power. And, you know, you still have an ineffective office, and if you just give it more money and don't give it the power, nothing really changes. So you hit the nail on the head, is that it's about the power. And what I've never figured out is that in 2018, we were destined to go where we're asking you to go today, and all of a sudden, there's been a reversal of that.
Thank you,
Merci
Mr. Newman,
infiniment.
and merci. Now we're moving to the NDP for 7 minutes. Ms. McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank the witnesses for joining us today. This is very important conversation that we're having, and I really do appreciate your insight. I'm going to start, I think, with the United Steelworkers. Mr. Olthius, Mr. Newman, you spoke about you know, the good actors, or those mining companies that are strong with regards to protecting human rights, strong with regards to protecting the environment. What is the impact of those companies that aren't protecting human rights, that aren't taking care of the environment? What's the impact of the bad apples, I guess, on the good companies when we don't have a system to hold them to account? And I'll pass that to either of you.
Doug, did you want to take that?
Thank you for the question. I think that, I mean, as we've heard tonight, there's many different allegations of Canadian companies not respecting human rights. If anybody spends an afternoon on the internet kind of looking and Googling Canadian mining companies, you'll find all kinds of allegations of harm, of environmental degradation. Now, do I know if all of those are credible? No. Does anybody on this committee know if they're all credible? No. And I think that's exactly the purpose of a credible ombudsperson, to be able to investigate specific complaints, to investigate it properly, so that Canadian companies who are behaving well can get out from under the cloud of these lingering allegations. The situation we have now is that the allegations linger and linger and linger, and they're never really addressed because there's no credible way, there's no credible core to investigate. And so I think the impact, to answer Ms. McPherson's question, is that all Canadian companies are dragged down. Investors are starting to look at the ESG factors more and more carefully, and we don't want the good Canadian companies to be tinged with the negativity. And there is a lot of negativity out there, and the whole point is to try to separate, you know, the real from the complaints, right? And because, you know, many people have complaints, but not all of them are human rights violations by any stretch of the imagination. But as we speak, we just don't know. And so that's the reason we need a really empowered core. I think it'll be good for all of us. It'll be good for the financial industry who will be able to make reasoned judgments on which companies are really respecting human rights. It'll be good for companies who want to raise money. It'll be good for workers, and it'll be good for communities.
I think that's perfect. I mean, I've traveled around the world. I've seen the impacts of those bad actors in a number of different countries, and I completely agree with your assessment, Mr. Olthius. So knowing that this is actually really good for good mining companies or good extractive companies, why do you think the sector, there are members within the sector, associations within the sector, who are not supportive of a core ombudsperson that has the powers to compel testimony and witness? Again, I can pass that to either of you.
I think that you'll have the opportunity to ask representatives from MAC and PDAC later on tonight. I can only speculate and suspect that I mean, they're speaking up for their members as we would speak up for our members. You know, at the end of the day, they don't want more oversight. You know, to be frank about it, they would prefer a voluntary approach to all of these human rights issues. And, you know, we do want companies voluntarily to take their human rights obligations seriously. And as you said, many of them do, but some don't. And we can't rely on a voluntary schema to address the companies that don't. And if I've got a second, let me just give you one example without naming any names. There's a Canadian mining company in Mexico where last year workers voted to join a truly democratic independent union, Los Mineros. What's remarkable is that the Canadian company, it's a silver mining company, refused to recognize the results of that election. And that's despite the fact that the Mexican regulatory authority gave representation rights to Los Mineros, and despite the fact that the president of Mexico insisted publicly that the company comply with the law. So the operations are suspended right now. The company is losing money each day. And so the question is, in the context of the core, what does that matter? Well, when I look at that, I see a company, a Canadian company that's willing to stare down the president of Mexico. And I can't imagine a company like that being willing to voluntarily, you know, cooperate with a core. This is a mining company that plays hardball, and a core that is in that kind of situation needs to be armed. It needs to be ready to be able to engage with that company from a position of strength. And that's not the core we have right now.
I completely agree. Very quickly, I know I'm running out of time, but I have one question for you, Ms. Cepeda. Have you, you know, knowing what's happening in Peru, knowing what's happening with Frontera, how they've stopped their obligations, they have not provided an abandonment plan, have you submitted a complaint to the core, in the core ombudsperson?
No, we haven't. We considered that option, but given what we have informed and the lack of power that we see that the ombudsman person has right now, we don't believe that putting the indigenous organizations through that effort, not knowing what the result is going to be, could not be the more useful way to approach the situation.
So basically, just to clarify.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're going into our second round, and so we will commence with the Liberals MP Iqra Khalid for just looking at the time. We've got about 3.5 to 4 minutes max for each questioner.
Thanks, Chair. And I'll continue down the same line of questioning as Ms. McPherson on. You know, what has been your experience? I know CORE is relatively new, and you just indicated that you didn't want to put the community through that experience, not knowing the outcome. But I'm wondering if you've had any experience with the National Contact Point or the Corporate Social Responsibility Counselor, really looking for what kind of challenges would an organization like yourself face going through that process?
We have not contacted the National Contact Point for this case. We are doing that for the case with the previous operator, which is this Dutch company, and the complaint that the Indigenous Federations addressed has just been accepted by the Dutch National Contact Point. But we are kind of trying to see what comes out of this effort and experience with our complaint to Pluspetrol to evaluate if we should do the same in the case of Frontera Energy, because it's two cases that have really similar situations.
Thank you very much, for that, Ms. Cepeda. I'll just very quickly, given I have such little time left, Mr. Newman, you had mentioned, well, the Steelworkers Humanity Fund published a report in January 2021, and in that report noted that Canadian companies are not always aware of where garments specifically come from, and any human rights violations that may occur because they're not directly involved with the procurement or the manufacturing of those garments. I wonder if you can maybe shed some light on some tools that the Corps could use in dealing with supply chains, specifically as it comes to garments or any other industries that may be impacted. You're on mute, sir.
Thank you very much for that question. And Bangladesh is very close and dear. And Doug Olthius, who is with us here tonight, he's the executive director of our humanity fund that was involved in the investigation. I personally traveled to Bangladesh. I was there exactly 1 year anniversary of the Rana Plaza collapse. And I always tell people when I come back, if the suppliers that purchase procurement from in Bangladesh seen what I seen, is I just don't know how they'll be able to go to bed with a clear conscience. And that's why the Corps process is so unique. And one of the things that we found through this investigation, I've had the opportunity to meet with families. I had the opportunity to meet with many of the people that have lost an arm or lost a leg or lost a family member. And it's just one of the things that I'll take with me for the rest of my life, to witness what I've witnessed. And I can't stress more forcefully in regards to the need that these places need. We have a lot of Canadian companies that are over there. We're trying to leverage them. We're trying to work with them, that they need to sign on to make sure that during this COVID period that they sign on to a fund that helps these people get paid. But if you have a minute left, Doug should probably jump in, because he's the one that shepherded that very important study that we did. Doug?
So there's two answers to your question. Specifically, the Corps, also in the case of the garment sector, the Corps needs strong powers to compel documents and witnesses to untangle a supply chain like that. So the Corps needs that. The other thing, though, that the Government of Canada could do, and we'd encourage you to look at that, is legislation on mandatory human rights due diligence, which would require Canadian companies to undertake a due diligence process looking at their entire supply chain. That's separate from the Corps, but that would be a really important thing to do.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. And that's the time, right on time. And now we're moving over to the Conservatives and MP Scott Reid for about 3.5 to 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe we can just go back to Mr. Olthius for a second, just to follow up on your most recent comments. You talk about the use of the powers of compelling witnesses to testify and compelling the production of documents for the purpose of untangling supply chains. I have to admit, I don't see how you could do that if the problem is a supply chain which is entirely located in another country. Presumably the whole problem is the Canadian company has not done due diligence, and therefore its supply of compellable testimony is going to be pretty limited. Am I wrong in that?
I can't say, Mr. Reid, that you're ever wrong on anything, but it's true that some Canadian companies haven't paid attention to their supply chain, but it's also true that the global supply chain is such that power rests at the top, which is the companies that purchase. And so those companies actually have a lot of power throughout the supply chain. They sometimes try to hide behind suppliers and say suppliers did it, but they're controlling the purse strings. So that if the Corps had the ability to compel documents from a Canadian company, that Canadian company would very likely have the ability to get those documents on a voluntary basis from their suppliers, because those suppliers really want to keep the Canadian companies happy.
So I'm going to suggest, just before I've got a little time here, that that the Corps sounds to me like is not the right way of doing this. You suggested another alternative, a piece of legislation that would effectively require you to do due diligence on a proactive basis. Could you just talk for a second about that? That does sound like a more promising avenue to go down from my humble and only partly informed perspective.
So you're correct. The Corps will work together with mandatory human rights due diligence legislation. The Corps is typically backward looking for complaints, and you're right, we want to avoid issues arising in the first place. So if companies were required to do a due diligence process and make sure that their impacts of their business operations don't have negative consequences, then ultimately the core, even an empowered core, would have no business because there would be no complaints. So you're right. Forward-looking legislation that would address the problems before they start would be a very good complement to the core. It doesn't replace it, but it would be a good complement.
All right, thank you. Do I have any time left, Mr. Chair, to continue going with this?
You have 1 minute.
1 minute, okay. In that case, let's just stick with Mr. Oltius. It sounded like there is some existing legislation somewhere that fits the model you were describing. I wonder if you could just fill us in on models that you think are useful.
Well, I mean, as you may know, and I think this committee has looked at some issues. There's many jurisdictions in Europe that are looking at that, at grappling with that question right now, following the principles of the UNGPs, United Nations Principles on Business and Human Rights, and how governments have to take those obligations seriously. We certainly have ideas about how to do that in the 5 seconds we've got. I don't think we can do justice to that other than to say, yes, Canada is not yet a leader in that area, but it could well be. And there are examples from Europe that we should build on, but Canada should do even better.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that's the time. And now we're moving to the block for about 3.5 to 4 minutes with Monsieur Alexis Brunel-Duceppe.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to let you know, or let the witnesses know, Mr. Reid is not always right. Anyway, Mr. Newman, you talked about this earlier. You stated it quickly, but when the government announced creating this ombudsperson, can you tell us what the expectations were and what promises were made at that time, please? Thank you.
Well, this was, I said in my testimony, sorry, I'm on mute. No, I'm not on mute. I said in my testimony, I was in Ottawa on January the 18th of 2018, and there was a group of us assembled because it was a celebration, because the minister was making an announcement with respect to the ombudsperson that basically was going to enhance in that legislation that the powers that we're talking about today, the powers that we've been testifying about, that would be in. And so that's why we happened to be there, because we knew and we were invited to be partake in it, only to find out sometime later that they didn't follow through on the decision. And as I said in my testimony, had I known then, or I know now, is that I wouldn't have attended for the so-called photo op, as I refer to.
Merci, Monsieur Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. And I think the most important for this committee and for Canadians and Quebecers, it's important to know what's happening in the field. I think that Madame Cepeda is the best place to explain this to us. Madame Cepeda, do you have any message that you would like to share with the Canadian government? Now's the time. I give you the floor to do so.
Yes, thank you so much. We believe that justice is not built only on political limits within governments. We believe that justice is built on the contribution of different actors, and that is why Indigenous organizations are seeking more and more allies in different latitudes of the world for them to be able to get the reparation that they need. And that is why we insist on having having stronger entities such as the core, but also we insist that we should take a step further and involve the Canadian government in the reparation of the damage that has already been done in this territory, and for the Canadian government also to talk directly with the Indigenous organizations and the workers' organizations in other cases that have been affected by these companies that are not meeting with the standards that they would work with if they were in Canada. That's what I would have to say. Thank you so much.
Merci infiniment.
Thank you so much. I think I still have a bit of time left, Mr. Chair. So, and I don't know who will be able to answer this, but Canada has obligations regarding human rights and Canadian companies abroad. Can someone here tell me what obligations specifically we're talking about? Perhaps Mr. Newman, you could answer that.
In about 20 seconds.
Maybe Doug would probably be more on top of that. Doug?
I mean, I think that I would refer you again to the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, which essentially says companies have a responsibility to respect and states also have responsibilities.
Thank you. And now we'll transition over to NDP. Merci. And we're going to have Ms. McPherson for about 3.5 minutes to 4 minutes. Ms. McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you to our witnesses this afternoon or this evening, depending, I guess, where you are. I wanted to just continue on with the line of questioning that I had finished with Ms. Cepeda. In terms of you putting a proposal or recommending to the impacted communities in Peru that they put forward a proposal, you had mentioned that you have not done that and that you wouldn't recommend that. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that? I know we cut you off, unfortunately.
Yes, what I was saying is that we had looked up into the option of putting this complaint to the court, but we have received information from other cases that and the information that we have ourselves about how this mechanism is working, that it wouldn't provide the enough mechanisms or a sufficient investigation for us to feel confident in the use of the core to present the report of what is happening in the indigenous communities. So we do believe that if the court had stronger competencies, we would highly consider this option, but because we are looking into having more strategies or avenues in which we can help the indigenous communities and organizations to have the truth and the justice that they are seeking.
So basically what we have then is a situation where the exact reason that the core ombudsperson was created, was put into place, the exact situation. We have a Canadian company with 90 spills affecting 25 Indigenous communities that have not provided an abandonment plan, have not followed through on their obligations to their community. This is the exact situation, and yet the communities do not want to apply to our core ombudsperson because they do not have sufficient powers to compel. Is that correct?
That is correct, and I couldn't have not say it better.
And just to make it, just to hammer it home, if the core ombudsperson did have the powers to compel testimony and witness, would the Indigenous communities that are affected by our Canadian oil company, would they put forward a complaint to the core ombudsperson?
100%, because we believe that what has happened in their territory has to be known by the Canadian government, and something must be done about that.
Thank you. That's very clear and important testimony to hear. I think one of the things that this committee has not had the opportunity to hear enough from is from impacted communities. I think that we've heard an awful lot from sector representatives, we've heard a lot from other groups, but we haven't had the opportunity to hear as much as I'd like to from impacted communities. So thank you very much. And then I just have a few seconds left, but I wanted to just very quickly, I get the last kick at the can, I guess. So it is a chance to underline some testimony we've already received. Mr. Newman, you talked about the change and how excited you were about the change that the possibility of the change that this core ombudsperson would bring forward, and how disappointed you have since been. What do you even think that this core ombudsperson provided any change from what we had under the Stephen Harper administration?
No, they changed the name, and what they said that they would put together a bit more money. And as I said in my testimony, is that if you have an ineffective office, and just by adding more money still makes it an ineffective office, and that's exactly what's happened. Look, our union's been working on this file. I think there's some members that I've seen here that we've been working on this file for quite some time. And yes, the labor movement in particular, I remember I was there with Hassan Youssef and some other affiliates that were invited by a minister at the time, is that it was a celebration. And that's why we all gathered. And we were assured that those changes were coming forth, only to be at some point. And I guess the question never had answered is that what was the change of heart? Why was the change?
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Thank you. And that's our time for this first panel. We want to thank our witnesses for the time. We appreciate that you've joined us here and for answering the questions. We are going to suspend now, colleagues, and for about 5 minutes as we bring in our next panel.
Thank you.
We're continuing to meet to hear from witnesses in view of our study of the role of the Canadian Ombudsperson for Responsible Enterprise. And for the benefit of our witnesses, I encourage all participants to mute their microphones when they're not speaking and address all comments through the chair. When you have about 30 seconds left in your questioning time, I'll signal you with the paper that just fell on the floor. And grab that, this paper here. And also for the benefit of our witnesses, there is a globe icon at the bottom of your screen if you require interpretation, English or French. You've already heard from those that are be joining us as witnesses, but let me reintroduce them. So joining us from the Philippines, Mr. Clemente Batista. He's the International Network Coordinator at Kalikasan People's Network for the Environment. And we have Mark Agnew, Vice President at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. We have Executive Director Lisa McDonald and Director Jeff Killian from the Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada. Margarita Duvgal on behalf of the Task Force for Real Jobs, Real Recovery, and on behalf of the Mining Association of Canada, President and CEO Pierre Gratton, Senior Vice President Ben Chalmers. So I am going to ask now our witnesses to make their opening remarks for no more than 5 minutes, and we're going to start. And I will hold you to that, just because we don't have a whole lot of time. We have quite a few witnesses, and we'll begin with Mr. Bautista.
Good evening. It's my honor to testify before you. I'm Clemente Bautista of Kalikasan People's Network for the Environment. I'm the International Network Coordinator. Kalikasan is a leading network in the Philippines working on ecological protection, conservation of resources, and defending the rights of peoples and communities. We have previously received funding from the Canadian government through its Canada Fund for Local Initiatives. I've been involved in advocacy regarding environmental degradation, human rights violation, environmental justice related to the operation of foreign mining corporations, such as Canadian-owned OceanaGold, TVI Pacific, Placer Dome, and B2 Gold. In 2004, indigenous Subanon leaders testified before this committee about the harm they were enduring from TVI Pacific, and this committee in its 2005 report recommended that Canada should develop laws to hold Canadian companies to account for the harm they do overseas. According to the international organization Global Witness, Philippines was the most dangerous place for environmental defenders in 2018. In Kalikasan 2019 submission to the UN Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights, OHCHR, we reported that from 2001 to 2018, at least 225 environmental defenders were killed. The majority of the victims came from rural sectors. 36 were indigenous peoples, and 58 were involved in campaigns against large-scale mining projects. There are other forms of human rights violations, such as red tagging, which is the practice of state forces classifying individuals as members of rebel groups such as the New People's Army, NPA, and the Communist Party of the Philippines, CPP, leading to trump-up charges, warrantless arrests, illegal detention, and extrajudicial killings. Kalikasan and its staff have been red tagged as front of the NPA and CPP. During with meetings with Canadian Embassy in Manila, we and our partner organization who are opposing OceanaGold and whose lives were in danger were asked if our local organization are front of the rebel groups. In 2019, police officials threatened to raid our office, alleging that we are recruiting rebels because we sheltered indigenous people displaced by mining projects and militarization in their communities. How dangerous is this? In 2018, April, human rights and environmental defender Benjamin Ramos was accused of being a CPP member. Months later, he was
Mr. Bautista, I think you hit your mute mic.
News articles, UN Human Rights Council reports, statements of UN officials, and findings by the Philippine Human Rights Commission validate my testimony. On the human rights and environmental violation of OceanaGold Corporation in the Philippines, our field investigation showed worsening degradation in the mining affected areas such as water pollution, forest denudation, along with social impacts such as community displacement, land grabbing, militarization, and increasing community disputes. In December 2009, Philippine Human Rights Commission reported that OceanaGold committed human rights violation in Nueva Vizcaya, particularly the displacement of indigenous people. In February 2017, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources ordered the suspension of OceanaGold for serious environmental violations. In December 2018, we submitted to the UN a complaint against OceanaGold, and our concerns were formally relayed by 7 UN special rapporteurs to the Philippine government and the company. Since July 2019, OceanaGold has not had a permit to operate. There has been an ongoing people's barricade since then to oppose the mine reopening. The people are supported by the different sector. In December 2020, in a letter to President Rodrigo Duterte, Nueva Vizcaya Governor Carlos Padilla, along with other religious groups, submitted a letter and reiterated their opposition to the reopening of the mine. The call to stop the operation of OceanaGold rings clear and loudly in the Philippines. On the ombudsperson, it is my understanding that civil society in Canada agree that the ombudsperson should have investigatory powers to get from the bottom of the facts by being able to compel the company to provide documents and testimony that are critical. I hope this will be immediately realized. Thank you very much. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you. Right on time, Mr. Batista. And now we'll move to Mr. Agnew for 5 minutes.
Well, Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to appear at this committee. My name is Mark Agnew. I'm the Vice President Policy and International at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. As many of you will know from the local chambers in your communities, our organization represents companies in all sectors, small, medium, and large. Although not bringing the expertise that my colleagues from the mining sector have, the Canadian Chamber has been engaged since the creation of the CORE was announced in early 2018, and our members have sought to work as constructively and collaboratively as possible with the CORE, as well as its predecessor organization, I should add, the CSR Councillor's Office, on matters related to RBC policy or responsible business conduct. As you'll hear in more detail from my colleagues, the Canadian business community supports and values protecting human rights abroad, and we also see an opportunity to make RBC measures a brand differentiator for Canada, and certainly also, investors are demanding accountability, and we are seeing that under the proliferation of ESG and CSR frameworks more generally. The Chamber and our members have been engaged in the development of the office, as I mentioned a moment ago, and we do support the September 2019 order in council for a few different reasons that I'll just mention here briefly. First, even after 2 years of startup, the CORE is still very much in its infancy in terms of building the structures and processes and getting staffed up and folks settled into their new roles. And granting quasi-judicial powers to compel witness and evidence would actually represent, in our view, a quantum leap that would in effect require a whole completely new organization. Secondly, we cannot underestimate the extraterritoriality issues at play here. And to ensure that investigations could happen fairly, there would need to be full access to the local communities, foreign governments, and contractors abroad, which I think in some jurisdictions particularly would be a very difficult proposition. Third, the office does have sticks at its disposal. Canadian businesses greatly value the work of Global Affairs Canada and the Trade Commissioner Service, and certainly losing that support due to a CORE recommendation to the minister would cause problems for the companies that rely on those services to support their in-market activities. And this should not be underestimated in terms of the value that it provides to companies. And just as a footnote, I was reminded in speaking with my colleagues before that it was actually the Mining Association that had advocated for these punitive measures as part of the 2014 CSR strategy. Finally, the Chamber believes that expanding the office to compel witnesses would actually neuter its ability to actually collaborate with industry vis-a-vis the mediation services or providing informal advice as mentioned in the current OIC. I would like to bridge over just for a moment to the process to develop a responsible business conduct strategy that's been going on with Global Affairs Canada. Given the friction that we've admittedly seen over the last 3 years in relation to the CORE, I think the strategy is a chance to help clear the air and set down some markers that will allow us to look forward instead of relitigating the same issues ad nauseum that we've seen since 2018. One element should be to put some markers around the various RBC, and I would add ESG and CSR frameworks that are in existence to package them together in a more coherent way for companies from a Government of Canada perspective. There are many moving parts to this, whether it's the core, industry developed standards, or changes that were brought into effect under the CUSMA around the importation of goods made with forced labor. It can be difficult for companies to navigate this, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises. The Chamber also recognizes the government's intent to eventually apply the core to all sectors. However, not all sectors have been in the room, nor are they necessarily aware of all the plethora of frameworks that are out there. And we encourage the government to use the RBC strategy as a chance to consult and engage with sectors that are not currently under the core to understand what obligations would be applied to them in the future. And lastly, I would just like to underscore the importance of ongoing industry-government collaboration, given the relationship that industry impacts abroad do have on the Government of Canada's foreign policy, and vice versa, foreign policy's impact on the ability of Canadian companies to operate abroad. And certainly from our perspective, it's critical that the RBC strategy has collaboration as a core pillar to ensure that there is a strong Canadian brand overseas. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Agnew. And now we'll move to Ms. McDonald and Mr. Kleen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee members, for the opportunity to speak today. My colleague, Jeff Killeen, is with me, Director of Policy and Programs at PDAC. And with over 7,200 members around the world, PDAC is the leading voice of the mineral exploration and development community, and our work centers on supporting a creative, responsible mineral industry. PDAC and the mineral industry have been a continuous and constructive partner in the development of the core since the initiative was first announced in 2018. Through numerous submissions and engagements, PDAC has remained confident that the core can play a vital role in promoting safe and responsible business practices and provide a transparent process for Canadian companies that operate abroad. Exploration is the vital first stage of the mineral industry ecosystem, where prospectors and small exploration companies predominate in the search for economically viable deposits that have the potential to become a producing mine. Companies involved in mineral exploration, both domestically and abroad, understand that they are guests in the communities in which they operate, and business must be conducted in a responsible, respectful manner. Canada's excellence in mineral exploration extends beyond scientific and financial expertise and includes global leadership in responsible social and safety practices. In 2009, PDAC developed E3+, a framework for responsible exploration, as a resource to help exploration companies improve their social, environmental, and health and safety performance, which was the first comprehensive guidance on responsible exploration ever produced. Together with the Mining Association of Canada's Towards Sustainable Mining initiative, our industry has made tremendous strides in the area of responsible business conduct over the last decade. Successful development of a prospective mineral project relies explicitly on obtaining a social license to operate. In this context, Canadian mineral exploration and mining companies continue to evolve best practices with respect to engagement and disclosure in step with rapid growth in public demand for responsible investment funds. This evolution is necessary for Canadian companies to remain competitive as environmental, social, and governance (ESG) performance becomes increasingly important to investors. The COVID-19 pandemic has reminded us of the resilience of the mineral industry, as many companies quickly adapted to find ways to continue operating safely and direct industry support such as personal protective equipment donations, monetary contributions, and other goods and services exceeded $150 million through the first 6 months of 2020. The mineral industry will continue to play a substantial international role as the world heals from the effects of COVID-19. Roughly half of all Canadian exploration and mining companies operated abroad in 2019, with foreign assets in over 96 countries valued at over $178 billion. This represents more than 2/3 of the total value of Canadian mining assets. Moreover, Canadian headquartered companies account for a material portion of exploration activity in almost every country and collectively represent approximately 30% of global exploration spending. PDAC is very appreciative of the level of engagement and consultation provided by the Corps and working to define such things as the operating procedures and related frameworks. Given the fulsome engagement process conducted to date, and in light of the $16 million in funding announced in yesterday's budget to support implementation of the Corps' mandate, PDAC recommends that the Corps should move forward with the currently defined collaborative approach before considering any expansion of its mandate. It is only through this practice that the Corps can assess its efficacy. Respecting human rights must be a top priority for all Canadian companies operating abroad, whether based in the resource extraction sector or otherwise. We look forward to ongoing collaboration with the Corps to ensure that Canada's mining and exploration sector can continue to be a global leader in sustainable and responsible practices. Thank you again for your time, for considering my comments, and we welcome any questions.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. Now we'll hear from Ms. Dovgal.
Hello, thank you for having me here today. My name is Margareta Dovgal. I'm the Director of Research at ResourceWorks, which is a BC-based nonprofit advocating for responsible natural resource development. My background is in energy, climate, and innovation policy, and I work to communicate the facts about Canadian resource industries to decision makers and the public. Last year, ResourceWorks convened a national coalition, the Task Force for Real Jobs, Real Recovery, which brought together 38 organizations spanning the country, including all resource sectors, labor, and many Indigenous organizations. We set out to determine how we can leverage Canada's natural resource industries for economic recovery from COVID-19 and how we can maintain and create jobs for Canadians. We found that the right deployment of natural resource industries can help supercharge our economy. Unsurprisingly, Canada's role in the global mining supply chain, including in mining exploration and supplying to projects around the world, is an integral part of our recovery opportunity. We released our recommendations aimed at the federal government in August 2020 as a report, Securing Canada's Economic Future, which can be found on our website, realrecovery.ca. Several themes relevant to your work here emerged through this research. For context, I was the report's editor and lead author. Firstly, we found that Canada's natural resource industries lead the world on sustainability and corporate social responsibility. They are optimally positioned to meet the evolving demands of global investors. With respect to this subcommittee study into CORE, it's important to note that our resource industries have actually developed standards and practices adopted internationally. This is true of forest management, chemistry, oil and gas, and of course mining, with Canadian companies leading the global implementation of TSM towards sustainable mining. Moreover, our government's work, such as on the CSR checklist for Canadian mining companies operating abroad, is regarded very favorably by host governments in Asia and Central and South America. As Canada's mining sector has long said, the pathway to better social and environmental performance is through collaboration and cooperation with international partners, not extraterritorial measures or an overly prescriptive approach that reduces host states' autonomy. Our own domestic regulatory experience has actually shown that reducing adversarial processes leads to better outcomes. We've also found the resource companies are often subject to much heightened scrutiny. The fact is that modern life is resource intensive. We must carefully balance producing what we need at the scales we need with protecting the environment both locally and globally. There is an opportunity before us now to meet rapidly increasing demand for metals and minerals as the world electrifies while mitigating environmental impacts. This requires an honest recognition of what it takes to live in an industrialized society with a high quality of life enjoyed by all. It occurs to me that we've seen something similar play out on climate activism. Canada is a jurisdiction where the screws of public opinion can get tightened easily. This has played out in national debates about energy export infrastructure, which occasionally fail to acknowledge that Canada is one of the world's most ethical, sustainable major producers of energy, which the world continues to desperately need. The vibrant debate we have about resource development in this country is not a reflection of inferior performance. It actually results in the most innovative, responsible practices which our companies take abroad. Canada is a solutions provider for better international performance in resource development. And I would credit the fact that this conversation here is occurring at all to an inclusive democratic stage for debate, in contrast to many of our multinational mining competitors. Take artisanal cobalt mining in Congo. Chinese multinationals dominate the space, and child labor and extremely dangerous labor practices are common under their purview. In contrast, high labor standards are a leading reason why Canadians are welcomed by host countries. As global demand for critical minerals grow, Canadian companies have an opportunity to provide sustainably sourced materials for electric vehicles, batteries, wind turbines, and solar panels. This direction is recognized in the recent Canada-US Joint Action Plan on Critical Minerals. Finally, Canada's role as a major resource economy provides us with a foundation for resource prosperity. That's great for paying the bills, such as for national childcare or the wage subsidy. Our resource industries also establish us as a global supplier of choice, not only for resource products, but also for resource equipment, technology, and services. Canadian innovation and expertise in emissions reduction, remediation, and manufacturing is needed around the world. And that is what we bring when our companies invest abroad. Any measures that this committee recommends should take into account the impacts on Canadian mining investment abroad. Canada's reputation as a sustainable producer gives us a competitive advantage, and these investment opportunities represent an essential opportunity for decarbonization through critical minerals, Canada's strategic and geopolitical partnerships, and our own recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. Right on time. So thank you, Ms. Dovgal. And now we're going to move to our final witness statement, and that will be from the Mining Association. We have Mr. Grattan, Mr. Chalmers, and then we'll move to questions, members. Members, we will only have the one round of questions because 7 minutes each of the parties will take up all of our time. So if you are going to think about sharing any of your questions because the other members may not be able to get in, you may want to do that amongst yourselves. And here we go.
Thank you. Canadian mining has a significant international presence, as Lisa just mentioned, with companies, 650 companies in almost 100 countries. However, we are no longer the world's top mining country. Indeed, Australia's two biggest companies exceed the net asset value of the entire Canadian industry, while China's control of the production of many mineral commodities is well known. However, Canada's role as a global leader in sustainable mining and responsible business practices continues to grow. Central to this work is a program that's been mentioned already, our Towards Sustainable Mining Initiative, a globally recognized tool for driving responsible behavior in our sector. Other countries have taken note of our leadership, and this program is now in the process of being implemented in Finland, Norway, Spain, Botswana, Brazil, Argentina, the Philippines, and Australia, and we spoke to the Colombians just this morning. They intend to do the same. Turning now to the core. A central focus has been on the core's powers, specifically whether the power to compel evidence and testimony would make for a more effective office. We believe that such an approach, while seemingly strong, would more likely lead to undesirable outcomes for all parties. We have based this belief on the experience and advice of professionals who have worked in this field, such as Meg Taylor, former World Bank compliance advisor, ombudsperson, or the CAO. In the first 10-year review report published by the CAO, Ms. Taylor found that every party wanted a quick judgment, but would only accept the findings if the CAO said that they were right. When a judgment was made, such as in the case of the Marlin mine in Guatemala, the CAO was drawn into the conflict, losing its status as a neutral party. The end result was that the cycle of conflict continued. Ms. Taylor further found that her mechanism was much more effective if it focused on how to change the dynamics of the conflict rather than imposing judgment. If one's interest is to reduce conflicts, we believe joint fact-finding and other collaborative approaches will be more effective. We have long supported the use of penalties, such as the withdrawal of trade commissioner support or access to government financial support, should companies not cooperate in these circumstances. We believe an ombudsperson with the powers to compel would lead all parties to lawyer up, be more protracted and conflictual. There are also issues of extraterritoriality that have never been honestly aired or considered. A few years ago, former Minister Jim Carr asked Barbara McIsaac to advise on whether the office is currently constituted, has the power to compel, and if not, what would be required to provide such powers. During the last several weeks of this study, the legal advice provided by Ms. McIsaac has been raised several times and has been characterized as strongly supporting the granting of such powers. But this is simply not accurate. Ms. McIsaac clearly states that whether the Corps should have these powers is a question of policy, while her mandate was to assess whether the powers could be granted and what implications they might have. Ms. McIsaac also states that she was struck by the fact that, quote, there was a consistent view between NGOs and industry that the most important consideration should be that the process should result in real change on the ground. They differed on how that would best be achieved. Ms. McIsaac says that without a way to compel, the Corps' effectiveness may be compromised, but goes on to say, quote, on the other hand, a process which includes powers to compel runs the risk of becoming overly confrontational and caught up in procedural wrangling and court challenges, unquote. Lastly, she observes that there is no way to overcome the extraterritorial limitations of these powers. They could not be used to compel evidence and testimony of local communities, independent suppliers, and contractors or state actors. The recent recommendation by this committee to increase the powers of the Corps in the context of supply chains into China makes me wonder how the ombudsperson would obtain the evidence of Chinese nationals to determine the existence of forced labor in the manufacturing of garments and appliances by Canadian companies. The office should be given a chance to demonstrate whether it can be effective. If further changes are to be considered, they should be done via a transparent process that allows all stakeholders to equally express their views with equal opportunity to consider proposed government policy options, including legal opinions. Finally, there has been much talk about the sectors the Corps applies to. Global Affairs Canada is establishing a new responsible business conduct strategy that recognizes the need to expand these kinds of mechanisms to all Canadian businesses operating abroad. The subcommittee's report on the human rights situation of the Uyghurs supports this because of the three sectors under the Corps' mandate, mining, oil and gas, and garments, only Canadian garment companies have a presence in the region. However, other Canadian business from sectors outside the Corps are present, such as those that sell household appliances or those in the solar and renewable energy sectors. Thank you. We look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Grattan, and we will proceed to questions from the members. And we were going to commence with the Liberals, with the Honourable John McKay for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for this evening. Let's go to the core issue, pun intended. And the core issue is whether the ombudsperson will have the ability to compel witnesses and documents. And the position of MAC, PDAC, and others seems to be that if those powers are not available, that somehow or another the investigation will be improved. That the ombudsperson conducting any investigation will somehow or another have a more useful, a more able investigation without these powers. It seems to me that that's a logical contradiction. And it's also an experiential contradiction because no court process is effective, no quasi-court process is effective unless there lurks in the background the ability to compel witnesses and documents to cooperate. It's a little like posting a speeding sign on the 401 and having no ability to enforce the speed limit. So I'll start with Mr. Grattan because he and I have been at this for quite a while. And why is it, therefore, that PDAC and MAC somehow or another believe that the Corps will be more effective in her investigations without these powers than with these powers?
Well, John, I've also given you this answer before, but I can do it again. And I also gave it in my testimony. First of all, you described a court process. We don't see this as a court process. There are courts, and people have access to courts, and there are rules that courts follow that are more expensive, more protracted. But things like due process are guaranteed in a court process. This is not that. This is something else. This is, as we have understood it to be, a model for mediation, for joint fact-finding, for bringing the parties together to resolve disputes and conflicts. It's for very serious crimes. That's where the law comes in. This is something different. And so if you're So that's why in our mind, if you're trying to reduce conflicts of something that's of a non-criminal nature, you want to try to bring the parties together. You want to try to, and you do that through an impartial process that the ombudsperson negotiates. And, you know, we, as I said before in my testimony, we're relying on the experience of those that have done this before, who have found that when they went down the road you're proposing, the results weren't what they'd hoped them to be. They actually found that they made the conflicts worse.
Well,
and that the collaborative approach was better.
With greatest respect, not all parties are equally willing. In fact, some parties will be quite reluctant to engage in any process, whether it's mediation, conciliation, or anything resembling a meeting of minds. However, their willingness to engage might well be enhanced if, in fact, the core ombudsperson had the ability, and that ability was lurking in the background, to say, well, we can compel both documents and testimony. And in fact, you have described a variety of situations where the evidence will be extraterritorial. I agree. It will be sometimes less than optimum. I agree. So why would we allow a process to develop that will be necessarily less than optimum in situations that will always be extraterritorial and be fraught with difficulties and conflict?
Unless I misunderstood you, I think you just supported my position.
I don't think that's right. I think you must have misunderstood me there.
Because what you're saying is, if it's extraterritorial and it's fraught with these types of difficulties, and that's been our point, it's very hard to do a proper assessment using the powers of compelling testimony and witnesses.
Why wouldn't you have the ability to compel testimony and witnesses in situations which are fraught with difficulties?
Because, well, you just raised the extraterritorial issue. That's why I'm confused by what you're saying.
I get that.
How would you, if you're trying to uncover what happened in a particular part of the world that is not Canada, say it's the Philippines, say it's Peru, say it's Colombia, and you want to find out what happened, and you need to compel the testimony of non-Canadians, I don't think you're going to be able to do that.
Well, maybe you won't be able to, but
so then you will. But simultaneously,
you will be able to compel the testimony of others. So your position is you would prefer not the full story over a more fulsome story.
No, quite the contrary. I think if you take a more collaborative approach, you're more likely to get people to sit down.
Well, that's an argument of faith and hope. And with greatest respect, in these kinds of situations, faith and hope doesn't go very far.
Well, I guess we just have to agree to disagree. I don't.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time, Pierre. It wouldn't be the first time.
We just don't. We are basing our position on the experience of others who have done this. Canada's not the first in the world to consider an ombudsman.
The example that was raised was the success that Canada has had in the mining industry, particularly in Canada. And there's a lot of truth to that. You know, environmental laws, human rights laws, et cetera, et cetera. We are an exemplary nation in that area. But why are we an exemplary nation in that area? And that is because of the ability to compel and testimony and compel documents and to hold people to account.
Thank you.
Okay.
And that's the time. And we're moving to MP Scott Reid for the Conservatives for 7 minutes.
I think we were actually moving to Mr. Chu, my colleague, for the first 4 minutes, and then I'll get the last 3.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And my first question, it's for PDAC, Ms. McDonald. In this committee, we just finished hearing testimony from, for example, Peru. There was a Canadian company who reneged its responsibility, and it has created huge problems for the indigenous community. And therefore, what would you say that core is still efficient in cases like that? It's Peru. It's an oil extraction operation in Peru, and its behavior has caused significant spillage in the area and significantly hurting the indigenous population there. So how could you think that core is efficient and effective?
Thank you for the question, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I think at this juncture in time, there have been no complaints that have been brought forward to the core, and so at this point we are looking forward, and we are looking for this process to be underway. So and we don't know that the core is effective or isn't effective at this point. I think we all agree that we have all spent the last couple of years working towards getting us to this point in time. So it would be very difficult for me to make a comment on testimony that was given in a previous by a previous witness and not really understanding the context. But you know,
fair.
In general, I think my comment would be, as we have stated, and our other colleagues have stated as well, is that, and Ms. Meyerhofer herself stated in her testimony that the office has now been set up and is now set to receive complaints, and we are looking forward to that process.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's move on to another question. Chinese state enterprises are one of Canada's primary mining sector competitors around the world and are increasingly displacing Canadian operations. And we have seen this in recent years in Southeast Asia and Africa. Could you highlight for the subcommittee some of the differences in approaches and impacts on host communities you have observed and noted when the Chinese flag is flying at a mine site instead of a maple leaf?
Given that PDAC represents mostly the exploration sector and my colleagues at MAC represent the operators, I would respectfully pass that question along to Pierre.
Fair enough. I just have 1 minute. Thank you.
So we certainly hear lots of different stories about Chinese operations in Africa. For example, they bring in they bring in their own workers. They bring in their own workers in Ecuador. Sometimes these workers are prisoners. They bring their prisoners to work in the mines. Their practices in engaging with state governments are not the same as ours either. So and slowly but surely they are crowding us out. Their presence in all over Southeast Asia is enormous. Our own ability to become a battery powerhouse is curtailed or limited, constrained by the fact that they have an increasing control over nickel. Because of their presence in Southeast Asia. So it's a very, very difficult market out there. And it is true, they're state-owned enterprises. They aren't transparent. They have no requirements to disclose like publicly traded companies do. And it's a very unlevel playing field.
Thank you. Over to you.
Mr. Reid, are you taking it? Yeah.
Yep, I'll go with this. Yeah. So actually, just pursuing the issue of Chinese state-owned enterprises. First of all, I should be clear on this. Just a quick question, Mr. Grattan. Is it the case that most of the Chinese companies in the mining sector are in fact state-owned enterprises as opposed to being private companies operating out of China?
There is a very thin distinction between the two when it exists.
Right. I think I know what you're getting at. Huawei is not a mining company, but it's a nominally private company that's largely owned by a trade union, which is itself controlled by an arm of the state. So similar sorts of situations would exist.
Yes, that's right.
My own experience in this regard is very limited. I had the opportunity to go to Eritrea to visit a Canadian company at a Canadian mine site in a place called Bisha, owned by a company called Nevsun. And what became clear to me while I was there was whatever the sins of the Canadians may or may not have been in this situation, there was interest within the Eritrean government from some participants in that government in having Canada operating there, because in a sense the Canadians are innocent. We just want to go in and make money. That's our entire agenda. We have certain rules we have to operate under. If you want to float a new bond issue on a Canadian securities, a stock exchange, you have to meet with certain criteria regarding labor standards and environmental standards and so on. These are all audited. And in the end, we want to walk away with some money, and that's all we want to do. Whereas the Chinese state wants to do a good deal more. It wants to get involved in the running of your country. And this seems to me to be a competitive advantage. The thing that we're trying to resolve here is issues where, in this particular case, but in many others, there's a supply chain of products or services that are provided to the Canadian company that may have involved human rights abuses. What do we do to make sure we can deal with that so that Canadian companies can continue to operate without being overly encumbered by our regulations to compete with the Chinese and any country in the world?
Well, I don't know, Ben, if you want to speak to this one. I am somewhat familiar with the Nevson case. They were not a member of ours, but it's a very well-known one. I mean, the response which Nevson undertook once the issue was, became so high profile was to do their due diligence. Today, companies would know early on they should do their due diligence.
Thank you, Mr. Grattan. We are going to have to move to the block, and Monsieur Alexis Brunel-Duceppe for 7 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses. It's very interesting. We've been carrying out this study for quite a while, and to have your perspective is very important for the report that we will be tabling eventually. I think it is quite fascinating. In the previous panel, and at every session of this committee, we've been told that Canada is not the leader it thinks it is regarding responsibility. And yet today, all of you have said that it's a priority for you to continue being leaders. However, you're also saying that it's not necessary to go further with powers, that it's not necessary because it's outside of Canada. We've been comparing ourselves with China since the beginning of this panel, and I have a question for you, Mr. Gratton. Can you admit that some of your members have companies that are committing crimes abroad? Have you forgotten this, or have you not heard the same stories that we heard? Because none of you from the industry have talked about mines committing crimes abroad. Have you forgotten this? I will not say that. We represent 45 Canadian companies or that have a presence in Canada. They're not all Canadian companies, but Canadian companies that are our members, no, I can't say that they are guilty or have committed crimes abroad. Even in Canada, there are cases where there are environmental issues and there needs to be reparation. I know that in the past there have been difficulties. I'm talking about right now. In the past, of course, but right now. And I'm addressing the question to all the witnesses. I can't say that all mining companies are good mining companies. There are some that are better than others. It's the same for all of the companies. I agree with you. But when you say we're leaders earlier, but we shouldn't increase the powers for the ombudsperson, what does that mean to be a leader? What I was saying was that we as an association have developed a program that is recognized internationally. And it's a Canadian program that we made that other countries have adopted because it is recognized as being the strongest in the world. And what are the results? Do you have any examples of the results of such a program? We have results here in Canada. I mean abroad. It's quite new abroad. So we don't have any results. That was my question. So there aren't any results abroad. Answer. There are results that will be published this year. Thank you very much, Monsieur Gratton. Madame Dogville, earlier you said it's a challenge for Canadian mining companies to work in democratic countries because they aren't as advantaged as others. Did I hear you correctly? I think that is what you said earlier.
Companies in countries like Canada are held to much higher standards for regulatory performance. That's correct. Mm-hmm. And with that comes uncertainty, complexity, risk. That's a fact of the more conditions you impose on companies in any regulated environment.
So that's why you don't want us to impose even better standards, because that could penalize us compared to other countries that don't respect human rights, if I'm understanding your argument correctly.
I would say that it's more about a concern in creating a power to compel that may create legal uncertainty and risk. So we need to be cautious, not to say that scrutiny must not be applied, but that uncertainty is the single greatest controllable impediment to investment that we actually need for Canadian economic recovery.
Donc, vous nous diriez que les compagnies qui...
So companies from totalitarian countries are better served because they don't have to face such high standards, correct? And so we shouldn't add more standards on top of that, because then we would be penalizing our own companies. Is that what you're saying?
I don't think that's accurate. Generally speaking, yes, we have to compete on a global market with our product. We need to be cautious of the competitive advantages we're gaining or losing when we impose conditions on our resource industries. But that doesn't mean our resource industries should not be held to standards. That's what FOR in its current iteration does.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bautista, I would like to hear your perspective. You have before you people from the industry. What do you have to say to them, please?
We are not against, or we are pro-development. We are not against foreign investments. But if this foreign investment cause us more misery, poverty, environmental degradations, we have no choice but to resist this kind of destructive operation like what we are experiencing from Canadian mining companies here in the Philippines. We have no choice but to defend the rights of our people and secure a clean, livable, and just future for our next generation. So we would like the Canadian government to have more a stronger ombudsperson, as I suggested, the power to compel information from hearing mining corporations, as such as that, particularly in the Philippines, where the report of the UN Office of High Commission on Human Rights said that there's a failure of local mechanism. So if you have this kind of mechanism, or where we could seek justice, where we could seek accountability, then it will be an open venue for us to make mistakes being made by foreign corporations such as OceanaGold to correct and serve an example for other mining companies.
Thank you, Mr. Bautista. We're moving to our final questioner.
Thank you to all the witnesses.
We are moving to our final questioner, and that'll be MP McPherson for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all the witnesses for being here today. Very interesting conversation today. Much of the testimony I've heard, I certainly don't agree with, and I have lots of questions. But I do want to start with Mr. Bautista, simply because he is representing an impacted community, and I find that we are not hearing enough about the impacts of Canadian mining companies on impacted communities. So, Mr. Bautista, one of the things that you had spoken about is that when you ran into issues with a Canadian mining company, you went to the Canadian Embassy and tried to get help from the Canadian Embassy, and you weren't able to get the support that you were hoping for. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and maybe talk about the support you'd like to see from the Canadian government?
We try to seek redress or support from the Canadian Embassy because particularly our experience in Nueva Vizcaya, where OceanaGold is operating, some of our local organizations and members of this organization are being red tagged. And we know that there's a policy guidelines or a program called Voice at Risk, where the embassy could at least investigate, give support, but we did not get that. And worse, we were asked the information right on our face that if we are or our local partners are true, they are front of rebel organizations. So, you know, we have other experience with the international community in the Philippines where when we are threatened, they visit our office to prove our legality, our legitimacy. But sadly to say, our experience with the Canadian embassy here, we didn't get that.
So what I'm hearing is there was an awful lot of scrutiny on whether or not you were representing a community and whatnot. We've heard from other witnesses today that scrutiny, and I'll quote, scrutiny is the biggest impediment to the sector. Can you talk about how you feel about that? Do you feel that the sector should feel that scrutiny is in fact the biggest impediment to their success?
I cannot understand the concept of scrutiny. Sorry.
Looking at their operations, examining what's happening on the ground.
Of course not. No, the laws in the mining laws in the Philippines, we think favor much the foreign investors. It's stated in our law that the foreign investment is critical in our development, so they give a lot of privileges. And scrutiny or looking at their operation, there's a lack of transparency, and we need that. No, we need that for us to assert what should be done correctly on the ground. So it's not true on our side.
And I would think that you would not think that the companies themselves should be the ones providing the scrutiny or the oversight of their own operations.
Of course, we have a lot of experiences here in the Philippines asking for information, but we got nothing from them. No, collaborative action with the companies is okay, but also more importantly, there should be an independent investigative mechanism where the process is not taking advantage, or the companies or even the government will not take advantage to promote their interests, particularly their mining operation in the Philippines.
Thank you so much for that answer. Mr. Grattan, we've spoken before, and I have a question for you, I guess. You know, my biggest concern here is that I don't understand why, if companies are acting appropriately, if they are acting, quote, like guests that we heard, why there would be this opposition, I guess, to having the oversight. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions, if you don't mind. I'm going to list some companies, and I'd like to know whether they are members of MAC. OceanaGold, Frontera, Beta Gold, Barrick Gold, Placer Dome, or TVI Pacific?
Well, OceanaGold, no. Placer doesn't exist anymore, nor does, I think, TVI. Barrick is. They have a mine in Canada, and B2Gold is. The others, no.
Okay, so the ones that are not your member, you have no ability to utilize the standard, I guess, that you have, because they're not your member, so they're not actually interested in the standards, I guess, that you have. The ones that are your members, they've been named today during the testimony today, this panel and the one prior, and they are named as not being good actors on the world stage. So I'm just wondering what the impacts of your members not being good actors on the world stage has for those of your members, those of member organizations of MAC that are good actors. So those good players, those good corporate citizens, what's the impact on them when there are Canadian companies that are abusing human rights, that are abusing the environment, that are abusing Indigenous communities? What's the impact on the good mining companies?
Well, of course, we all want to raise. That's what we're trying to do through TSM, is to raise the bar for everyone. But we can only do. But
it's not compulsory, and it doesn't have to happen internationally, and it doesn't apply to people who aren't to companies that aren't your members.
But as other jurisdictions adopt it, it starts to get taken up by more and more, and it starts to apply to more and more. We do what we can.
Well, how long will Mr. Batista and his community? How long will communities in Peru? How long will communities in Nicaragua? Communities in Ecuador? How long do those communities are they expected to wait for you to develop these programs?
I am not suggesting in any way that TSM is a replacement for government oversight. I am not suggesting that at all. We were describing what we have done as Canadians, which I think is laudable, because no other jurisdiction, even though there are more powerful mining jurisdictions in the world, none of them, even the Australians, have now adopted our program, even though they're a far bigger.
Well, as an Albertan, I can say the Australians are not impressing me with their mining practices at the moment. Well, thanks very much.
Well, thank you, and thank you. That will conclude our time. I just want to thank, on behalf of the committee, I would like to thank our witnesses for appearing, for taking the time. We appreciate the answers they've given us to our questions. At this time, you are free to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Agenda that was set today, it was changed several times, and in the final version that we actually did not have Kalakasan being there in the final version. I just checked the notice of meeting, and so we were planning our time allocations because of that, and it's awfully difficult when you have so many witnesses coming in and only giving them so little time to ask. So
you're right. We did try our best. We did try to get Kalakasan into the first panel. That was not possible due to technical difficulties, Mr. Chu, and so we did bring him into the second panel.
But unfortunately, they were not listed in the final notice of meeting. I just want to bring it to your attention. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. Noted. Okay. Thanks. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Good night.
Good night.